Today we are talking about cell specialization. So we're looking at, once we've got our basic cell, how do things get tweaked and changed in order to then make cells that are specialized for a particular function. So there's quite a lot of different cells that you come across in your course. So it's nice to have a broad overview as you get started in order to know what's coming and how things are going to link together and what you're looking at. So we're going to start off, before we can get into specialization, we need to make sure that we're on the same page with cell structure. So we'll start off with just looking at the basics of a generalized plant cell and a generalized animal cell. So we start off, let's see how we're going to manage space here. We'll do an animal cell and a plant cell here together. So there is your first key. When we draw animal cells, we normally draw them around, and plant cells are normally square. Okay, but this is our generalized cell. So we're saying we have this sort of idea of what's in a cell, and this is what we think it's going to look like if we just take a general cell rather than a specific cell. So what do we find inside our cell? We find a nucleus. So let's put a line there for nucleus. We find mitochondria, providing energy for our cell. Site of aerobic respiration. We draw them with a little bit of wobbly inside. Okay, so here it's only one. So in this case, we would call it a mitochondrion. Okay, what else do we have in animal cells? We have rough endoplasmic reticulum. So that we draw something like this. And we don't want to draw too much of it because rough endoplasmic reticulum has a whole lot of dots on the outside. And those dots are important because those dots are ribosomes. And it wouldn't be rough endoplasmic reticulum if it didn't have them. So we shall get a whole lot of dots stuck to it. Okay, and a label line for rough endoplasmic reticulum. Very important in the building of proteins. Okay, we also have ribosomes just scattered in our cytoplasm. So that would be a ribosome. And in animal cells, we also have small little things called vesicles. So vesicles can be filled with different things, and they can be involved in transporting things around the cell or in and out of the cell. Okay, so we have, we've got a big one. The contents of the cell, the cytoplasm, and of course, around the cell, the cell membrane. So let's just double check that we've got everything. Cell membrane around the outside, jelly-like fluid in the middle, the cytoplasm. Nucleus, nice big organelle with all the DNA inside it. That's where all your genetics are happening. Okay, controlling the cell. We have our rough endoplasmic reticulum for building proteins. Our ribosomes also involved in building proteins. Vesicles, mitochondria. Looks like we're good now for an animal cell. So bear in mind, if you go and Google animal cell structure, you're going to find out all sorts of other things, okay? But remember, we're learning bits and pieces at a time. So when you learned this in foundation, you had a simpler version. Now we've added a few more things in. When you get to AS, you're going to add a few more things in, and if you take your studies further, you add even more things in. Okay, so this is the level that you're working at for IG biology. So now that our animal cell, if we have a look at our plant cell, another big difference on that plant cell is that we have two lines around the outside. Those two lines are very close together. And what they are representing is that cell wall. Plant cells have a rigid structure on the outside. So there is our cell wall. See how my label line goes to the middle, exactly between these two lines, right? It doesn't go all the way through. It can stop on the outside, that would also be acceptable. But we can't go all the way through because the all the way through one against that cell wall is your cell membrane. Because a plant cell, like an animal cell, must have a cell membrane because that controls what goes in and out of the cell. A plant cell, like an animal cell, also needs genetics. So let's get our nucleus going on. Plant cell, like an animal cell, also full of cytoplasm, and it also has mitochondria with their wobbly insides. Lots of folded membranes in a mitochondrion in order to have lots of aerobic respiration. So we have a difference with the cell wall. We also have a difference. We have in our plant cell, great big permanent central vacuole. We still have our rough endoplasmic reticulum. So let's put him in here. We'll draw a bit less so we don't have as many dots to do. So you can have ribosomes that are free and ribosomes that are stuck to the rough ER, but all types of ribosomes are involved in making proteins. So let's find a space here to give our label for rough endoplasmic reticulum. Then we can put in some random little ribosomes. Okay, what else are we missing? If you have a think about it, we've got important things when we come to plant cells, and it's all about that photosynthesis. So we need some other organelles, and there's a few of them. Okay, we're just going to draw two. Same like there's more than one mitochondrion in the cell. Okay, we've just drawn one because I don't have all the world's greatest amount of space here. So these ones have discs inside them. We'll draw them something like this. So we know they're different to that mitochondrion. This one is called a chloroplast. Okay, so our generalized plant cell will have chloroplast in it because that is a key feature of a plant cell. So we've got our nucleus, rough endoplasmic reticulum, chloroplast. But we also have vesicles in plant cells. They also have to transport things. So there's a vesicle for a plant cell. Okay, we've got ribosomes, we've got a vacuole, cytoplasm, cell membrane, and cell wall. So we've got a lot of things in common between an animal cell and a plant cell, and then we've got some few extra additions on our plant cell. So same warning, if you go and Google structure of cells, you're going to find different things to this because we're learning at different levels. These are the guys that you need to know. All of these little things inside the cell are called organelles, little organs, okay, for the cell. And so these are the organelles that you are studying at IG Bio. So now let's have a think about some of those specialized cells that you're going to come across as you work through your course. So we shall start off with a few animal cells. Okay, so we're going to talk about ciliated cells, nerve cells, and red blood cells. So three very important types of cell. If we just have a look at them structurally, a ciliated cell looks very odd. Okay, our nerve cell also looks rather odd and very different to our ciliated cell. And that's a very long way to draw a nicer straight line. Okay, and our red blood cell, that looks rather like our generalized cell. Let's draw it a bit bigger. But there's going to be some key differences. Okay, so we can see already that the structure of each of these is different. And what is so important is that the structure of the cell very tightly linked to the function of the cell. So each time we have a specialization in the cell, either for structure or function, it's going to relate to the other one. So if we have a funny shape, it means that it's linked to the function of that cell. Whereas if we have a funny function, then that's going to be related to a funny shape. So if we start out with our ciliated cells, then we've also still got our nucleus. We've still got our rough endoplasmic reticulum. We've still got mitochondria. We've still got all these things going on, right? What we've got at the top is a special feature. They're your cilia. Only one L in cilia. Okay. These cells are found in your nasal passages, in your trachea, and in your bronchi. And those cilia can move. They can sweep. So what happens is when your mucus is produced within the lining of your airways, then these cilia are responsible for moving that mucus out. We don't want all that mucus to build up in our nasal passages or in our trachea and our bronchus, but how is air going to move through? It's all full of mucus. So we need to move that mucus and everything that it's trapped out. And we do that with the movement of those cilia. So ciliated cells are going to need cilia. They're going to need quite a lot of mitochondria as well because they're creating a lot of energy for the movement of these cilia. So in this case, we have an extension in order to get those cilia so we can move the mucus. Nerve cells, and I drew him rather a bit larger on purpose because, of course, when you do your nerve cells, you're looking at cells that are going from your spinal cord all the way down to the tips of your toes. Okay, so some of your nerve cells are incredibly long. They've got a cell body. They also have a nucleus and everything else going on. But then they have, so we'll just give a little bit of things going on in here because it's so important. Then they have a very long, elongated axon. Okay, and this is insulated to conduct the electrical impulses. So we have funny shapes where we can receive messages at the top here. We can send messages at the bottom or the other way around, depending on what kind of neuron that we're looking at. So when you get into your looking at nerve cells, then you're going to get a whole lot more information and detail on the different types of nerve cells and how they all do their jobs. But it's all about that receiving of information and that sending of information. And that is what these connection points that we have are all about. So we have lots of connection points on our nerve cells as well. So future you is going to learn all about synapses as well. Okay, that's what our connection points are forming. But we got then specialized structure and specialized function. Now a red blood cell doesn't have a nucleus. Okay? Red blood cells are all about the transport of oxygen. Now we transport oxygen using hemoglobin, which is a special pigment found in the red blood cells. Now the thing is, of course, if we want to specialize in transporting oxygen, we need to have as much hemoglobin as possible. We don't want to have a big nucleus taking up space within our red blood cell. We want to have hemoglobin. So a red blood cell has no nucleus. My spelling is a bit back to front this morning. Okay, so no nucleus in order that you can have more space for the hemoglobin. But now if you think of a cell as a little ball, You think that hemoglobin in the middle, that's far away from the outside of the cell. That means it's far away from where that oxygen wants to go to. So red blood cells, if we cut them in half, okay, we take a cross section, they're even cooler. What they are in cross section is this shape, which is called a biconcave disc. So it's like you take an oval and then you squish it in the middle, okay? So we have a biconcave disc. So if we look at it this way, it looks round. But when we turn it sideways, we see that it's a biconcave disc. We cut it in half. Okay, and what that means is that there is no hemoglobin that is ever far from the outside of the cell, which means that there's no oxygen that's tucked up in the middle of the cell. All that oxygen is relatively close to a cell membrane and it can get out. So the structure of the red blood cell is really designed in order to help it meet its function. Okay, our red blood cells are also tiny, tiny little cells. Okay, so they can fit through our capillaries, our smallest blood vessels, in order to take that oxygen to all the different pieces of the body, all the different tissues that need the oxygen in order for their cells to function. Okay, so we've got really tiny cells, we've got maximum space for hemoglobin. So each of these body cells, these are all animal cells. Okay, so we're starting off with this idea of what an animal cell is in brown, but then we're going to specialize it depending on the function of the cell. Okay, so all of these are body cells. The other type of cell, of course, that has a real specialization is the sex cell, so the egg and the sperm. Just need to plug in because I'm about to lose power, which would not be a good plan in the middle of a lesson. So let's now have a look at the sex cells and how their functional differences and their structural differences are related. So we would have the egg and we would have the sperm. Let's try get a little bit of a size difference, but of course it's very difficult to do that given the space available and the idea that you still need to see what I'm drawing, okay, because we have a massive difference in size between the egg and the sperm. So we've been talking a lot about gametes when we talk about genetics lately. So focus point for our egg and sperm, of course, is the nucleus. Each of these has a nucleus, but remember this is a special nucleus because these are haploid nuclei. They've only got half the genetic information. Okay, so we have half the genetic information, but what else have we got going on? What other specializations? Okay, our egg cell is a large cell. Okay, we have a cytoplasm full of nutrients, extra nutrients, right? The sperm cell, okay, so we still have our rough endoplasmic reticulum, we still have our mitochondria, we have our vesicles, we have our ribosomes, everything like that general cell, okay? But it's a big cell. It's got extra nutrients in. Our sperm cell, it's got everything also, but he is going to have a lot of mitochondria, because remember, mitochondria are the site of aerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration is where energy comes from. So we have lots of mitochondria because we need lots of respiration in order to get the movement. So why do we need such a big cytoplasm on our egg? Okay, remember that when we get fertilization, it is only the genetic material that comes across from the sperm. Okay, so then we would have half from the egg, half from the sperm, add them together, one whole genetic unit. Okay, the thing is that then all the subsequent development is based on the egg. So we need that great big nutrient supply in order to provide the proteins and the fats and everything else that's needed for subsequent development. Okay, so it's really important that that egg is a large cell. Sperm's got to move, so he's got a lot of mitochondria, but he's very small because other than movement, it's just about the genetic material that's in that nucleus. So we've talked about body cells, we've talked about sex cells for animals, but we've also said that plants have specialization. So let's have a look at specialization in plant cells. We're going to look at, again, 3 types. We're going to talk about root hair cells. We're going to talk about xylem. And we're going to talk about the palisade mesophile. So as you get into learning more about plant biology, you're going to bump across each of these types of cells, sort of where they are and where they're doing their job. But again, this understanding that cells can have specialized shape, which links to their specialized function, is one of the really important fundamental underpinnings. So let's have a look at what we're talking about in terms of shape. For a root hair cell, we have a roughly square shape, and then we have a long, thin extension. Okay? These are plant cells, so of course they all need a cell wall. So that double line all the way around. When it comes to our xylem, then we're often looking at something more this sort of shape. And this is a very deliberate double line thickness. Okay, so now you can already see one of the differences. Okay, so we've got an extension on our root hair cell, which we don't have on our xylem, but a thicker wall on our xylem. Palisade mesophile, also not going to draw it like a square. We're going to draw him more in a rectangle. Okay, also with a normal cell wall. Then there's major differences as well on the insides of these cells. So root hair cell, we have our great big permanent vacuole, we have our nucleus, we have our mitochondrion, right? But we don't have any chloroplasts. Your chloroplasts are for trapping sunlight. A root hair cell is underground. Okay, so we have no chloroplasts. Our palisade mesophile cell, on the other hand, we have our nucleus, we have some mitochondria, and we have a whole lot of chloroplasts. Okay, so these are all chloroplasts. Because a palisade mesophile cell is in the leaf of a plant. It's right there where the sunlight is coming in. So these are the cells that are responsible for very high levels of photosynthesis. So if you want high levels of photosynthesis, then you want lots of chloroplasts. Our poor little xylem doesn't get mitochondria or chloroplasts, doesn't even get a nucleus, okay? Because he has a really thick cell wall, and that cell wall is waterproof. Now, if your cell wall is waterproof, you can't actually have anything inside that's surviving. So xylem is a dead cell. Okay, so let's add a little bits of annotation so that we've got all the notes coming here. We have an extension of surface area. Okay, root hair cells are all about the uptake of water, so, and mineral ions. If we want to increase uptake, the more surface we have in order to increase that uptake, the better. Okay, so the root hair cell is about that extension of the surface area to increase uptake. And we have no chloroplasts. We've got no exposure to light, so we don't need chloroplasts. They have no functional use. We don't want them there. Okay, so that's our root hair cell. Our xylem is a very thick cell wall and waterproof. So there's a substance called lignin that's involved in deposition here. Okay? So if we have a very thick waterproof cell wall, we have a dead cell with no organelles. Purely there for the transport of water. It's just a tube. Okay? Our palisade mesophyll cell, on the other hand, has lots of chloroplasts. Because the palisade mesophyll cell is there in the leaf. It's all about receiving that maximum sunlight so we can maximize photosynthesis. So we need lots of chloroplasts. Okay, so same like in animal cells, different structure means different function. So when we get these lovely specialized cells, it's linking into the function of what's going on. So what are the structural specialization and what can that mean for function? And what is the function of my cell and therefore what structural specialization do I need? So all of these you're going to meet in greater detail as you go through the course. But it's important to have a good idea that life does not revolve around this basic generalized cell. Actually, many of the cells that we deal with have far funkier shapes because then they're actually able to do their job